In the week since I finally finished Prey, I've been waiting for my opinion of it to mellow out somewhat. I was trying to convince myself that I enjoyed it more than I did, that my opinion of it is only tainted by the fact that I just moved on from one flawed but reasonably fun open world space adventure to another flawed but reasonably fun open world space adventure. Sadly, that just isn't the case. My 20 hours with Prey were plagued by messy storytelling, wonky physics and horrendous glitches that grew worse and worse the further through the game I progressed. By about the midway point, I was impatiently wondering how much longer I had left. By the end, I was so sick of the game that I gave up trying to achieve an objective that the game seemed adamant it wasn't going to let me complete, and just steamrolled my way through to whatever ending I stumbled across. I stopped caring, and unfortunately, that lack of care and distinct sense of tedium and boredom is all I took away from Prey. To give a little backstory, I played the original 360 release of Prey back in 2014, a good while after its initial release, and found it lacking. I don't want to tread on any toes or upset anyone. I'd heard it was a great hidden gem of a game, and after buying it for just one solitary British pound, I was excited to see what all the fuss was about, and I did not enjoy it at all. It's been a while and I can't quite recall precisely what it was about the game that I didn't like, other than that it stretched on for far longer than I had any desire to play it for. And by the time the game ended, I lobbed the controller across the room, buried the disc in the recesses of my bedroom and never thought about it again. There is no desire in me at all to ever want to play the original game again, and sadly that is a sentiment that's carried over to this reboot. So you might be wondering, why on earth did you buy the reboot if you hated the original game? There's a simple answer: Arcane. Arcane Studios have very quickly become one of my favourite developers in the past few years. Both Dishonored and its sequel have been endlessly replayable, with Dishonored 2 being my second favourite game of last year. They're flawed but ridiculously enjoyable, with an enormous combination of playstyles, and an interesting morality system that's particularly exciting in the first game. So yes, I can hear you sighing and shaking your head. I foolishly bought Prey not because I liked the original, not because I wanted a reboot of a series that I was frankly surprised to see revitalised, but because I enjoy the developer's previous works. A schoolboy error, it turned out. Prey is a somewhat open-world science fiction game, based on the alternate history timeline in which Kennedy survived the assassination attempt, propelling the space race to new heights. You take control of Morgan Yu, the male or female sibling of established scientist Alex Yu, who's invited you to join him in his work for Transtar, the corporation mastermind in the space race. You awake fresh-faced and eager for your first day on the job, and it all goes downhill from there, of course. Once you move past the opening sequence and reach Talos 1 proper, the game broadens its horizons and gives you relatively free reign of a vast, complex space station, with the ability to explore its exterior limited only by how far out of your way you go to find and disable the airlocks. The map isn't huge, but it is twisting and turning, adequately realistic, with a ton of effort poured into it to make it look as believably habitable as possible. The game looks gorgeous for the most part, although the decision to reuse Dishonored's slightly cel-shaded style has its ups and downs. In some instances it looks fantastic, whereas in others the mildly cartoony textures can seem a bit out of place. The space vistas are particularly enjoyable though, and when you're not being bombarded by exploding enemies, chilling outside the station and drinking in the vast endless emptiness of space, distant planets and innumerable stars is simultaneously daunting and relaxing. Arcane have gone to great lengths to make each area unique. So instead of just endless chrome-coloured corridors and samey rooms, the hallways are slightly differently shaped. Rooms are given certain identifiers with a little personality injected into them to make them feel like they belong to people instead of just places where the corpses used to live. The station is appropriately enormous and cavernous, feeling impossibly huge yet relatively easy to traverse, and opening up more and more of it by exploring and finding new routes or new keycards is greatly enjoyable. Much like the original Resident Evil, the game encourages you to pay attention to which doors and which areas are initially inaccessible, so that when you do eventually come across a keycard, you'll immediately recall where the door is and head off to uncover new quests or collect new goodies. It is worth exploring as much as possible because actual useful materials like ammo and healing goods are in short supply. Once you've built up your arsenal, you'll rarely find yourself hurting for the necessary materials to create medkits or psi-hypos. I had a massive collection of them for a long time before the exploding cystoid enemies appeared, and they promptly savaged my supplies. On the subject of your arsenal, there are a huge number of items, powers and playstyles to choose from, with the game encouraging you to experiment as much as possible. Abilities are divided into two categories, each with 3 subsidiaries. One category dedicated to human abilities such as hacking, strength upgrades and stealth, and a second category dedicated to Typhon upgrades. Powers acquired by absorbing alien DNA, which can range from transforming yourself into various objects to creating phantom copies of yourself. The only trade-off to choosing to take on more Typhon upgrades is that human defense systems are more likely to consider you a threat, but since turrets in the game are made of paper mache, this is hardly cause for concern. And your ability to use these powers is governed by psi, a pool of mana, as it were. that can be refilled by using the aforementioned Psi-Hypo, which is basically akin to System Shock 2's Psi-Hypos. This scores means you can play however you see fit. You can play without powers, you can play with all human powers, you can play with a mix of human and Typhon powers. They're all completely viable approaches in their own right. This does present the opportunity to talk about one of the game's smaller flaws, the lack of a respec function. This is something the game really should have allowed, not necessarily the ability to swap and change powers on a whim, otherwise players would have been able to abuse the system by removing one upgrade, adding another, completing an objective that required a specific upgrade, and then swapping back again. But perhaps being limited to one respec hypo every few hours, or having only 1 or 2 respec hypos per playthrough. One of the first things the game tells you is that there are multiple ways to complete an objective. But then it creates several objectives, some of them tremendously important, which can only be completed in a specific way. As a spoiler-free example, there's a communications probe in the shuttle bay that requires you to have repair level 3, which needs 15 neuromods to unlock. I ended up recycling a bunch of EMP grenades to get the right materials to create neuromods, which is a little bit irritating. I mean, I wasn't using them anyway, but that's beside the point. In terms of physical weapons, you build your gear up quite fast, beginning with a basic wrench before being showered with handguns, shotguns, and the rather amusing glue gun, which is a projectile launcher that allows you to clamber along walls or tar enemies up with white rocks to give yourself a little breathing time. There are multiple types of grenades, with the EMP grenade being in particularly strong supply around the ship, although I never found much use for them. They don't seem to affect many enemies and are only really handy for dealing with large groups of mechanical operators. Both ammo and grenades can be created via the game's fabrication process. There's plenty of junk lying around the station that can be deposited into recycling machines, providing you with a variety of materials needed to craft ammo, grenades, medkits, and so on and so forth with what's called a fabricator machine, which is limited only by your ability to find blueprints for the items you want to craft. I enjoyed the recycling and fabricator mechanics. Having to carefully choose between more ammo or more hypos, medkits and neuromods was a great dilemma at times, with me often resorting to creating handgun ammo because it was the easiest thing to make. Ammo is incredibly scarce even on the lowest difficulties, and it still takes a good 10 to 15 bullets from a fully upgraded handgun to bring down the different types of phantoms. On the flip side, the difficulty in finding enough materials for certain types of recycled goods needed for ammo fabrication was a massive pain, and I wound up with 40 units of some recycled goods and none of the others. When it comes to what you'll be pointing your trigger fingers at for the vast majority of the game, I found it to be a mixed bag. Some enemies, such as the basic mimics, start the game off by being intimidating, oftentimes just running off into the distance and not actually attacking unless you attempt to hunt them down. By the midway point of the game, mimics are a crawling joke compared to the enemies you're now facing, and that natural progression in your levels of fear and panic is fantastically implemented. Once you get a variety of weapons and have a decent range of ways to deal with them, the basic interior enemies pose very little threat, but the skirmish is still fun. However, certain enemies grew especially frustrating very quickly. Enemies such as the cystoids that shoot endless streams of exploding radioactive enemies at you can go to hell. They're incredibly irritating. You can waste a ridiculous amount of ammo trying to destroy them before they reach you, but they move so quickly and deal so much damage that a single group of them can and will kill you very, very fast, well before you have time to react. I found these enemies are most frequently hanging about outside, where the lack of gravity means they aren't restricted as they are inside, so they can float about wherever they feel like it, and once they've locked onto you they won't stop. I appreciate that the game punishes you for just wasting your ammo on enemies that don't necessarily need it, but if you're trapped outside with little to no ammo and a group of 10 or more exploding enemy sacks haunting the door you need to get through, it isn't so much daunting as aggravating. As you might be wondering, yes, this game does seem to ape Dishonored's approach a little too strongly. It is very clear from the art style and looping level design that this is the company that made Dishonored. Like the Souls games, their staples are all over it, and at times it's a bit difficult to shake the feeling that this is just Dishonored in space. The physics engine is also a little touch and go. In some instances it's perfect. Traversing the outside of the ship is a lot of fun, panic-inducing and absolutely not pleasant if you suffer from vertigo. In other instances, most notably in trying to use the glue gun to create platforms to traverse, it ranges from serviceable to utterly obnoxious. I had instances where a series of makeshift platforms worked fine for the first 2 attempts, until Morgan would randomly start sliding off them the next time I tried to jump up. It was insanely frustrating trying to get somewhere I'd gotten to before just because Morgan refused to stay on top of a platform. While I'm on the subject of complaints, there is one massive issue I have yet to broach: performance. I played this game on PC, running it on high with a pretty decent rig. If you want the specifics, they'll be in the description. The game was obscenely glitchy, particularly in its final few hours. I had multiple instances of frame drops and clipping, got myself stuck to the environment and had the game crash 4 times in the same room. It's also worth noting that although this didn't happen to me, players have also reported issues with the save corruption and progression bugs, so be wary. It grows very tedious and becomes a massive chore to play. This game's strengths are not in its story, but in its exploration and environmental narrative. Scouring Talos 1, uncovering its mysteries and learning about the lives of its inhabitants was a lot of fun, but completing its story wasn't. There are a lot of things to do, but they don't necessarily factor into the overall plot nor affect its ending. But they help to engage you in the world and invest you in the lives of the people who came before you. Despite how determinedly the game tried, however, I was never 100% invested in the world it had lovingly fashioned for me. It did not help at all that I simply couldn't complete one particularly important mission because the game glitched out and first would not register that I had completed the quest, and then after several reloads in an attempt to fix it, stopped registering that there was a third stage to the quest at all. I had to abandon it because I simply couldn't finish it, the game wouldn't let me. There's also a problem with other quests. One mission to help a survivor completed after I investigated it and found it to be a trap, and then quite randomly the quest failed an hour later stating that I had chosen not to help him. Considering that your attitude towards the survivors affects certain aspects of the game, this really frustrated me. I knew exactly how the game was going to end from the very beginning. This is a problem I found with Arcane in general. They create great premises and build extraordinary rich worlds rife with detail that are a ton of fun to run around in, but their ability to weave a story around that world is a bit lackluster. This was the issue both Dishonored games had. They struggled to tell the stories around the worlds they lived in, with Dishonored 2 being particularly bad for this. Missions feel independent of the world, with a strange disconnect between the two, making it very difficult to feel invested in the story. Prey has a similar issue. It tells a great background story, but its overarching narrative feels devoid of character or purpose, with the exploration and poking around in people's belongings being a lot more fun than actually completing its main missions. Morgan has the potential to be an interesting character, and without wishing to spoil, your opinion on Morgan might vary wildly depending on your personal post-credit sequence. In my case, I found that I was satisfied with his characterisation, as although I knew exactly what was coming, the game didn't attempt to hide its twist or misdirect me, but only evaluated my performance and rewarded me accordingly. This might not necessarily be the case for everyone, but although I found the story lackluster and its ending just adequate, I enjoyed its flawed execution enough to want to continue pushing forth with a story I wasn't really enjoying, and combat that was a bit frustrating. All in all, I was disappointed with Prey. It started off strongly, but fell flat around the halfway mark. A lot of what I was doing felt pointless or tedious. Characters were awkward and stiff, the animation was not quite up to scratch with the rich environments, but more than anything the game just bored me. This is not a game I'm eager to go back to. I have no desire whatsoever to play Prey again, which is a shame because I was pretty hyped for it. Since I admitted at the start of this video that I didn't like the original game either, I'm not really surprised that I feel quite lukewarm towards this one. Much like the original Dishonored, it's heavily hampered by its poor narrative, but unlike Arcane's previous games, it is also a technical mess towards the end. The massive amounts of glitches I encountered ruined this game for me. I'd recommend not playing it until the save data corruption bug has definitely been eradicated, and hopefully the rest of the glitches have been solved as well. Until then, this game is maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for me, and it's unlikely I'll want to give it another shot. Unsatisfying, frustrating and bleak, it was at least more enjoyable than the original, but its forefather had a clearer image of what it was trying to be and trying to do. This game is unpolished, though not unfinished. If you're really determined to play it and you're a console gamer, consider renting it instead. If you're a PC gamer, I implore you to wait for future patches. You'll thank me for it. The second category dedicated to Typhon upgrades. Powers acquired by absorbing alien DNA. I don't know if it recorded that. Dedicated to Typhon upgrades. Powers acquired by absorbing alien DNA.
Oh my god, JC, a bomb!
A bomb.